Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that snowstorm that we had. That was really something, right? Today is our second class for our information literacy course. Remember that the information literacy course is a 1-credit course that balances out the 2-credit course that Professor Bill is teaching, all right? So it is only for 6 weeks. Today is our second class. We will be talking about certain things about preparing research, and we'll also do a brief review for the midterm. The midterm will take place next week because it's the 3rd week. All right. On my website, I have a review sheet from the first week's class with different terms and information that will help you study for the midterm. It will be short. I started putting it together. It will be no more than 20 questions, and it will cover the first and second week's lectures, all right? So today we'll be discussing how to evaluate print and online sources. What does that mean? Just because we find information written in a newspaper or a magazine or a book or on the internet, it doesn't mean that this information is correct. What we try to do is use what's called reputable sources, sources that we know have a good background behind them. For instance, if we were quoting information from a newspaper, we would probably, if we're in New York especially, but in the United States, we might look at the New York Times. The New York Times is very reputable. They fact check their information. They have reporters and writers who are very thorough. If we wanted to talk about something that was going on in the United States about, say, election fraud, that might be a good place to start. However, there are small newspapers out. Some of them are slanted to the right and some of them are slanted to the left, okay? I'm not saying that the Times is either right or left, but it's a good place to start to gather your information. Then you could branch out to other places to see what you're going to find, all right? If something is on the internet, it does not mean that it is true. It doesn't mean that it's totally factual. All right. Anyone can post whatever they want on the internet as long as the filters, the people who look at this, don't feel that you're hurting someone directly or it's inflammatory. For instance, in history, there was the Civil War in the United States in the 1800s. And remember, we did a poem, "Oh, Captain, My Captain," 2 semesters ago about Abraham Lincoln. And it was about the Civil War. Well, we know that at the end of that conflict, the North came out victorious, all right? The North won the war. As sad as it was that so many people were killed on both sides, the North was victorious, and there were certain reasons for that. However, you can go onto the internet and there will be people who will tell you completely different information. They can tell you that the South won the Civil War, and they can give some background information that they say supports that. So that's where a good researcher comes in. We fact check the information, thank you, that is online, all right? So sometimes you have to go to one location. Sometimes you need to go to 2 locations. Sometimes you have to talk to an expert. You have to look at different things. A perfect example of this, and I'm not saying either is right, but let's look at news networks. We can look at CNN, which is a news network. It reports news items, and it is considered to be very reputable. On the other hand, we can go to Fox Network, Fox News, and many people love Fox News and believe what's on Fox News. Both can report on the same topic and many times have completely different views and facts on the topic. So you can start with each, and then you can branch out and look at other places and see, compare this information, compare that information, and then use what source you feel is correct, all right? So that's one of the things we're going to talk about. When you're going to do a search, you do something called a Boolean search, and that's Boolean. It's just a silly word for how to do a search online, and most of you do this already. You use keywords that will be in the topic that you want, so that you can pull up articles and information. There are certain words that work well in a Boolean search. The first one is and, A-N-D. That will narrow your search. This is a good way for you to, you're looking to buy a blue car and you want a new one. New cars and blue. That would put it in together, okay? Abraham Lincoln and his presidency. Abraham Lincoln and his childhood. Abraham Lincoln and his assassination. If we were going to talk about his assassination, we really don't need to know about his childhood. If we want to know what came together to make Abraham Lincoln a great man, we might look at his childhood. Or maybe we want to see what he's done as the president. So maybe we don't need to know too much about the assassination or how he grew up. So that term in the Boolean search, the first word that we're going to talk about was and. Now, if you want to exclude something from a search, the second word that we're speaking about is not, okay? Not, N-O-T. And this will narrow your search and it will help eliminate things that you don't want. For instance, presidents of the United States not before 1960. So all those presidents that were president, all those people that were president before 1960 are going to be eliminated in your search. And starting from 1960 to the present, you're going to start seeing the names of the presidents from 1960 on, okay? Large fish in the ocean, not whales. Okay, we know whales are big, right? Okay, they're mammals, but we think of them as fish that are swimming around. So you might get dolphins, and you might get sharks, and you might get sunfish, and you might get swordfish, but no whales. Okay, so we've eliminated that by using the second word, not. Okay, and that will help you with your search. The third word that I want you to think about is or, O-R, and that expands your search and broadens what you're looking for. Oh, let's see. Buildings built in the United States or Italy in 1980. Okay, you want some in the United States, maybe famous buildings, and you also want some in Italy, but you don't want any that were built in England, okay? Or, all right? Fashion in the 1970s or 1980s. So you may be talking about paisley shirts, you may be talking about all sorts of leather boots, that kind of thing. But you're not going to get some of the things that were in the 60s, like flower power, tie-dye, that kind of thing. So the three words that we use to help us expand or limit our search when we're looking and we're doing a Boolean search are and, not, and or. Okay, so what I'm thinking now is that we take a look and see how a Boolean search works. Okay, so let's see if I can get this right. So that taught us a little bit about, just let me stop this. That taught us a little bit about how we would search and what we would find. So it also showed us why we would do this. I'm sorry. We do it so that we can eliminate unnecessary things, okay? And that makes things a lot easier for us. The second topic, I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot today and my throat is really dry, is about copyright. Do you remember last week we talked about the Library of Congress and copyright and what copyright was? And that was the area where if you wanted to protect your interest in what you're writing or making or doing, you would send it to the Library of Congress and file for a copyright to save it so someone couldn't steal your idea. We've all seen that C in a circle. That's the symbol for copyright. A copyright is an intellectual basis to protect intellectual work. Movies, songs, sculpture, art. It protects company name like Coca-Cola and symbols that might give you the idea of a Coke sign or a Pepsi sign or something like that. And a patent protects the idea, an expression of an idea, and it encourages the idea that you can look at the information and bring it forth, but you can't claim it for yourself. And that's really important. Remembering last week that we did learn about copyrights and the Library of Congress and how important that is. The Constitution encourages information and dissemination, the giving out of information to a way to broaden people's knowledge and education. And it also, when you copyright or you get a patent for something, it protects the owner of this information, of this project, of this invention, while the information is going out. So you can't steal that idea. You can't make money off of that idea, all right? And let's see, what does it take to get a copyright, okay? And first, the piece that's being copyrighted must be done by an author, a person, okay? He has to create it. And it must be independently created by that author. However, you know, it's sort of like if we had a partner, if you had a partner and you were working on something together, the copyright could be in the name of both people, okay? And it must be fixed. It has to be a real thing. You copyright how to make plastic cups like this. You copyright how Apple Watches are made. All right, they're tangible. You can touch them. They're here. They're not just ideas, all right? So copyright means that it is a protection for work done by someone. Literary works, such as writing journals, writing books, articles, research, motion pictures, right? You can't steal that. Musical works. All great musicians copyright their songs. And sometimes you hear of a case where an artist says, the beginning of that song or the middle of that song is very similar to mine. And they go out and they have a lawsuit to make sure that someone's not using their ideas. And many times they win a lot of money on that. So sound recordings as well, songs, recordings to help you relax, recordings where you do a blog, that sort of thing. And also architectural work. You would copyright if you design a certain building a certain way, you would put a copyright in that as well. Let's take a look at copyrights, okay? and see what we can find. Okay. See that little C? Okay, so the two topics that we talked about today were Boolean searches with and, or, and but, and about copyright. Those two topics will be on your midterm next week. There is no lecture next week. You just go on, you take your midterm, you click submit, and it's done. Only for this class, not for anybody else's class. This is the only 1 credit class that you have. I want to give a little review from last week because this will also be on your midterm. And I'd like to tell you about, remember, we talked about first recorded history. They didn't have books back then. What did they do? They used thick clay tablets where they carved into it, and then they'd stack the clay tablets. So that was the first way that they recorded history. And we talked about Nyack College and the college library there, and how you can go to Nyack College with your student card and go in and use the facilities. We talked about its name, and its name is Eastman Library, right? So you should know the name of the library at the college that you're going to. One of the things that I talked about was Benjamin Franklin. And what did he start? Well, he was great. He started one of the first libraries, but that library was a subscription library. Remember, we talked about that. You had to pay to be a member. So that excluded poor people and people who just couldn't afford to do that. You know, they had to spend money on something else. So that only served rich and higher level people. We talked about a New York Public Library and why it was founded. And it was founded to provide free access to information and materials to everyone, okay? Everyone. So now you didn't have to pay to go to the library. I mean, we do pay through our taxes, but you're able to go to the library and borrow books and sound recordings and look at maps and all kinds of things. All right, it is open to everyone, okay? We also talked about the New York Public Library and its historical collection, and that the historical collection contains something I think is really neat, a draft of the Declaration of Independence, the real Declaration of Independence, before they finished it, a draft of it, right? You could see that there. We also talked about another library, as we did earlier today, the Library of Congress, which is the library used by Congress. It's very large. It contains many, many pieces of work. It comprised of 3 buildings, okay? And one of the things that we know about the Library of Congress, which is in Washington, D.C., is they have a, like we talked today, copyright office, okay? So those are some of the things and the ideas that we talked about last week in our class. Next week, you will have your midterm, and then the week after, we will start with our 4th class. Have a great week. Do well. Good luck on your midterm. I know you'll do fine. Review the sheet that I have posted on my site, and also listen to this week's lecture and last week's, and you'll be great. Bye.